Hello, welcome back. If you've been here before, if not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is my series called Fear Entity Exploration, based off of the Magnus Archives, which is a horror podcast written by Jonathan Sims and Alistair J. Newell. This series is going to be looking at every single entity in the Magnus Archives, exploring how they're implemented within the show. I will be analyzing 3 different episodes that I've chosen, talking about why these episodes are great showcases of that specific dread power, along with covering other elements, such as why I like the episode so much and what it does well. I've chosen these episodes based on how they, 1, impact the overall story, 2, how they portray their respective entity, and 3, based on my own personal experience, if I like them or not. I know that memorable, self-contained statements/episodes and important plot statements/episodes will be my main focus, as those are the most interesting, but there will be some wild cards here and there. I also chose these episodes based on, 4, how I ranked episodes of the Magnus Archives, using some overly complicated math that I didn't really need to, so check out my ranking videos to be familiarized with my opinions. Heavy spoilers for the entirety of the Magnus Archives, as I will be discussing these episodes with the full knowledge of 200 episodes. You have been warned. Enjoy.
The hunt is also animals.
Yeah. Been a long time since humans had any proper sense of our place on the food chain. I mean, we haven't been prey for what, thousands of years?
And again, when an animalistic fear touches a human,
You get the predator's granddad out there.
The animalistic fear of being prey, a basic sense of danger that all animals with nervous systems use to keep them alive. The fear of being chased, of being eaten and preyed on, keeps everything, from squirrels to grasshoppers to salmon, from dying. To animals, this fear is an adaptation for survival, as most organisms have an innate need to eat and reproduce, and when another dangerous animal appears, this fear helps them survive to the next day, to survive and eat and reproduce all over again. While most of the fears that humans have are based on lived experiences, irrational phobias, or perceptions of danger, the hunt seems to be a more innate fear, less complicated than the rest. However, due to the intricacies of the dread powers in the Magnus Archives, the simple fear of being prey is crossbred with the complex neuroses of humans, as John and Jerry touched on briefly. And this leads to some interesting manifestations within the show. I think we can all understand the instinct to flee from danger. Sometimes it may be tinged with the fear of dying or the fear of pain, but when the chase begins, there's usually only one thing that anybody's mind is on: run. For me, it's difficult to understand how that would feel, as thankfully we, or at least I, don't get to feel that as much as other fears. Usually, you're not being chased by anything. But movies and stories like this help us explore that feeling in a safe space, and yes, being chased can be terrifying. The hunt in the Magnus Archives has an interesting yet limited presence within the story. Per my count, there are only 6 episodes with statements or events that solely feature elements, aspects, or avatars of the hunt. Solely. This is not counting overlapping episodes. Of these 6 specific episodes, half of them I've ranked in higher tiers, half of them I ranked in lower tiers. The hunt, per my count, is the second least represented fear, only being beaten by the extinction, which has, I guess, a leg up or a leg down by having 5 official episodes only within 2 seasons. There is a however in those prior statements. Yes, 6 episodes only by my count, but there are a large number of episodes that feature important hunt avatars tangentially. Keyword, tangentially. The hunt may feature occasionally, as whenever Julia Montauk and Trevor Herbert show up, such as in 36 Taken Ill and 153 Love Bombing. And it also features frequently, as one of the main characters is affiliated with the hunt, Alice Daisy Tonner. Unlike the Dark and Desolation, which were the last 2 entity explorations I've covered, the hunt is the first of the entities that I am covering that deals with a main character, and an important one at that too. Daisy is a prominent character that starts in season 2 and continues all the way to season 5, going from a police officer in like season 2 and 3 to a hunter for the Magnus Institute and Elias, part of season 3. And then after her connection to the hunt is severed in season 4, she's still an employee of the Magnus Institute, but she's just kind of there. And in a moment of action, she's completely taken over by the hunt and needs to be killed by Basira, her partner, in season 5. Daisy takes part in a lot of important episodes as well, such as investigating with Basira after Sasha's presumed disappearance, as we see in episode 61, Hard Shoulder. She also marks John with the hunt in episode 91, A Coming Storm, and participating in trying to end the unknowing in 118, The Masquerade, and 119, Stranger and Stranger. While Daisy is a prominent and important character with an amazing character arc, and Julia and Trevor are pretty common as well, the hunt becomes relegated to tangential mentions and asides more than any other fear. The sole representation for the entirety of the hunt includes the 3 characters that I mentioned that appear a lot, as well as quick lines that mention hunters, just like one quick line within episodes, such as 151, A Big Picture, and 80, Librarian. And also, besides all that, the actual hunt-focused episodes. But the majority of it tends to be the 3 characters, and then sprinkling here and there lines of hunters. While the Dark and Desolation seem to be pigeonholed into single important aspects of the story, the hunt seems to be more dispersed among the story. To me, the hunt being so widely spread out among episodes without being represented with focused episodes is disappointing, if a bit understandable. The hunt doesn't need to be focused on as much because Daisy herself shoulders much of the representation, and since she's such an important character, it makes sense to not overbalance anything. What few episodes we do get vary from amazing to uninteresting, at least to me, and the limited treatment of the hunt allows it to feature in more different, less rigid, more experimental ways than any other fears within the episodes. Because of this, the story feels less certain of what it wants the hunt to be, which is disappointing in comparison to the other fears. But the moments that the hunt does appear, that it does rear its head, are strong and vibrant with its creativity and its vibe. What I want to do is look at the 3 episodes that I've chosen about the hunt and use them to explore the things that I like about the hunt and the things I don't. As I said before, I am making the series in ascending order from the entities I least like to most like. And so out of 15 total entities, the hunt is lucky number 13. I'll let you guys guess the top 3. For the hunt, the 3 episodes that I've chosen are 112, Thrill of the Chase, 133, Dead Horse, and 176, Blood Ties.
When I reached them, they all turned to stare at the blades in my hand, and one by one they took whichever knife spoke to them. I ended up with a vegetable knife, one of the smaller ones, but wickedly sharp. I can show it to you if you like.
Statement of Lisa Carmel regarding her involvement in a series of murders. Statement number 0111311, 13th November 2011, released on August 1st, 2018. A summary of the episode. Basira reads a statement of Lisa Carmel, who explains how she started Murder Club, officially called the True Crime Discussion and Reading Group. The core group consists of her, Jamie Sanders, Ananya Kaleka, Evelyn Kaleka, wives, Andrew Cochran, and Debbie Truss, where they discuss and theorize about true crime documentaries, books, and podcasts. Throughout her statement, Lisa alludes to the murders that they'll cause, along with stating the current deaths of Evelyn, Jamie, and Debbie. There's a moment where Daisy interrupts to tell Basira that John has arrived from the United States. Back to the statement, one day while having a meeting in Lisa's apartment, a man wearing a pale mask knocks on their door and attempts to kill them. The club members overpower him, killing him and hiding his body, and after that, the 6 of them split off and begin hunting each other. Lisa witnesses Debbie killing Jamie, and then being chased by Debbie herself. Lisa kills Evelyn on a bridge, and Andrew kills Debbie in an ambush. Lisa apologizes to the statement taker in case Andrew and Ananya turn up and wreak havoc looking for her. Basira ends the statement mentioning that she remembers the case and knows that Andrew was killed at some point, and Ananya killed Lisa and was apprehended by police. She notes that she had not heard anything about a man with a mask regarding the case. And Daisy returns and tells Basira that they had to distract Elias for John. And Basira tries probing Daisy's hunt tendencies. This episode is pretty fun for me because of the absurdist and almost comical nature of what occurs, along with it sparking conversation between Daisy and Basira about her being a hunter. Come to think of it, a lot of the episodes have this absurdist feeling to it regarding the hunt. There's some other episodes in other fears that have this absurdist feeling to it, but the hunt has more prevalent. This is coming right off of 111 Family Business, when we got all of the fears officially named in the story. So we're already primed to want to know more. The different fears focused here, it's all hunt, and maybe like a little bit of eye near the end. But that's like, the eye is pretty omnipresent within the story. Yeah, the hunt is mostly the only fear focused here. A little shout out to Basira's voice actor, Frank Voss, who has kept Basira alive in our minds and hearts since season 2 and all the way into Protocol as well. I will not tolerate any Basira slander. She's a complex, interesting, and flawed character, as is most every main character in this show. If I hear any Basira hate, I will throw hands. I like how in the beginning of the statement, the beginning of the episode, she begins reading the statement, trying to emulate John, and then corrects herself internally and continues reading normally. Just a little funny moment that helps describe her a little bit more. Basira is a pretty funny character, like dry humor-wise, or at least written to be. So the statement itself, there's not much to say about it. It's not connected to any larger storylines, which is a good salve after the heavy lore dump of the prior episode. As per the conventions of the statement, we get Lisa Carmel describing the murder club, as they call it, and mentioning how, quote, she didn't mean for this to happen and how they didn't choose to chase each other, which could come off as an excuse. The delivery of the line, not how I delivered it, the delivery of the episode itself, kind of makes it feel like truth, like she actually didn't expect this to happen. They didn't mean Murder Club to descend into this. They didn't choose this, but Lisa isn't looking for forgiveness. She's only looking for clarification. Her backstory of not liking horror but loving true crime is a good indication of people's different affinities for the fears and what they do to prepare themselves to either become an avatar or get targeted by a fear. Sure, Lisa and the rest did not choose to be taken by the hunt, but they definitely set themselves up for success by focusing so much on true crime. It's just that there's a part of me that gets an awful little buzz from it, like that shudder that goes through my body when I'm getting all the gory details of how someone died at the hands of a real-life human monster. Books, podcasts, documentaries, I went through all of them and still wanted more. We see Lisa feeling fear about what she reads about and how she's drawn to that fear. With other avatars or people close to becoming avatars, we've seen them having an affinity for the fear, whether highly affected by it but still drawn to it, or simply focused on it frequently. In 13 alone, Naomi Hearn self-isolates as that's easier for her, but she doesn't quite like it, and then she's taken by the lonely. In 144 Decrypted, Gary Boylan actively seeks out the repeating numbers and then gets hit by the extinction, or at least his father does. In 106, A Matter of Perspective, young Kilbride's fascination and fear of the void are used against him to be touched by the void the best. Lisa and all the members of the murder club have set themselves up to feel the fear of the hunt, and because they are all in close quarters with each other, the fear flows through all of them. One person will read something that will make the others feel fear, and vice versa. And so it all becomes a constant feedback loop of fear and pleasure from all of them. I mentioned reading about Tilly Klimek or Kilmek. a Polish-American serial killer living in Chicago whose murders lasted from 1914 to 1921. I had to do research on this. She would have precognitive dreams that predicted the deaths of her husbands and other victims, when in reality she was killing them on those days with poison. They also mentioned visiting the True Crime Museum in Hastings, a true location in southern UK. Just fact checking here. As Lisa begins to describe the meeting where the hunt would begin, she mentions the other 5 arriving. We all had our little pre-club catch-up talking about life and work and the state of the world, and we were just about to dive into the main discussion when there was another knock at the door. We hear this knock.
And we were just about to dive into the main discussion when there was another knock at the door. Oh. Oh, hi, Daisy.
This is a neat jump scare. Throughout the show, we have had the knowledge that the statements that John and the others read have already occurred in the past and are simply being read out. Usually, there's non-diegetic music and sounds that are added to the episode by the creators of Rusty Quill, but canonically, that's what non-diegetic means, the characters can't hear these sounds. We are aware of this non-diegetic addition of sound. Also, there are very few interruptions to the statements, and when they are interrupted, it's telegraphed to the audience in very distinct ways so as to be able to startle them out of the headspace of listening to the episode easily and smoothly. This could be John slowing down his voice, or John's voice like halting, or another voice speaking, all different from what we're listening to in the statement itself. This allows for complete immersion of the episode as we listen to the statement like reading a book or watching a movie, living within the dream world of the story. That's sort of like the theory of narrative. So there are these 3 subconscious and conscious conventions within the Magnus archives working in tandem to create this jump scare. When Basira reads out the knock on the door, and we hear the knock, and we hear her respond to it, and we don't get an obvious interruption, we are immersed within the story, witnessing a parallel action that just got read out to us, and in a brief moment, we are brought closer into the statement than we are comfortable with, as if the statement is happening in real time, and that is startling. And this moment does pass soon, and we get Basira and Daisy talking, and I've taken a lot of time to explain a simple jump scare that's so small, but it's a really smart one. It's a really smart one. The man in mask is described in really great detail. The first thing I noticed was the height. They were well over 6 foot, and the top of their head disappeared above the door. The second thing was the mask, pure white polystyrene and cut into the rough shape of some kind of demon or wolf. The third thing I noticed was the knife. Really good separating it into thirds. I love the rule of 3s. The height makes the man seem unwelcome and threatening, with like not saying the rest of his head. It's like he doesn't care. He's just standing there. That feels uncanny. And the mask adds to that feeling as well. The description of it, of being either a demon or wolf, is very telling. It's a moment that further shows how the show does not want to establish a rigid canon with the hunt. The man is implied to have started the murder club's hunting, and it could have been easily explained as just a wolf mask. But mixing in the ambiguity of demonic aesthetics reduces the animalistic feel of the hunt and adds a more esoteric feel to it, more occult. It makes the vibe feel different than just animal, The man tries to attack the club, but his movements are clumsy, swinging widely and labored, and he tries to stab at some of them, but he keeps missing, or they keep dodging. And for some reason, none of them act in the way that we expect, which is trying to run away. Instead, they attack him, and he falls and knocks himself out. And the group gets knives, and they just kill him. And this sets off their hunting spree. I think the man in the mask was a sacrifice. Wherever he came from, whoever or whatever sent him here, he was easy prey to ignite their instincts. He appeared from nowhere, and they suddenly hunted each other. Maybe He was attracted by the fear that they drew and consumed from each other, perhaps himself being a person taken by the hunt, and his introduction into their lives allowed the hunt, the fear of the hunt itself, to sharpen their focuses and desires and get them to start attacking each other. When they kill him, all of them feel pleasure. And Lisa describes it as like having a full meal. And they hide the body and they all leave. Lisa falls asleep quickly, as if exhausted. And when they wake up, the hunt begins. It feels very sort of transition-y, how a nightmare moves. The interesting part of their battle royale is that it doesn't seem to have an element of fear. Or at least Lisa doesn't describe being afraid. She feels the want to kill and searches for it, and that's it. And the way she talks, it feels like she's just talking about a book that she's reading, like a true crime novel that they so enjoyed. As she's being chased by Debbie in that one part, she only describes her movements, but not what she feels. And as soon as our eyes met, I knew the chase was on, and this time I was the prey. There's no indication of what she's feeling in that moment when she becomes prey. She just begins running. It might not be just fear, but adrenaline. The constant running and fighting would definitely get their blood pumping, which is what they enjoy. And since Lisa was alive when she gave the statement, obviously, there's some people who gave their statement after he died, but whatever. She was alive when she gave this statement. And there's no way to know how she felt when she died. It's entirely possible that as the murder club members murder each other, they feel the fear of the hunt, catch up to them at their moment of death, the feeling of being prey. We don't know if that would happen. Much like their meeting was a give and take of fear, their chasing is a give and take of fear as well, making their emotions equalize and not feel the fear that they have, while also getting the power that an avatar would get from their respective fear. Take a shot every time I say fear. Lisa talks about the deaths of the three members with a detached sentiment, but then she has a realization. And I was thinking yesterday how strange all this was, and it occurred to me that while it might seem ridiculous, maybe there was something supernatural about all this. She compares how they were before the meeting to now, and she can see something went wrong, and that realization led her to giving her statement. This detached sentiment carries over as she seems to just want to talk about it, not to repent for her actions or ask for help. And it's a very odd and different way to perceive these events. Most of the statements, people are so very afraid, or at least look back in fear as to what happened to them. But this statement, she's just sort of telling us about it. At the end of the episode, Basira mentions how Ananya Kaleka was the last person standing and being arrested. The way the other officers told it, she never said a word except to plead guilty and died in her cell a few months later. Apparently, she just stopped. And this is just like an avatar dying when they don't feed their fear. In a way, perhaps the only way she could feed her own fear was within her group. And once they all died, there's nothing else to get. Plot stuff. Daisy returns and tells Basira John went elsewhere and they need to distract Elias, because he has eye powers. John's headed to Gertrude's storage unit, as we see in 113 breathing room, and he got directions from Jerry last episode. Like he says, I found this key, Jerry says that Gertrude had a storage closet in this location. He says the place, I don't remember where the place was, but John says, I found a key. Is that for that? And he's like, yes. So, next clue. Basira stops to ask Daisy how she feels about killing. We've seen Daisy incessantly chase after John in the beginning of season 3, thinking that he probably killed Sasha and Gertrude. And the dead body of Leitner, too, yeah. Basira sees some parallels with the statement. She asks Daisy if killing feels like the warm glow of an approving parent tinged with a bloody sweetness, which is a direct quote from the statement, but Daisy deflects. Basira doesn't have the knowledge of the fear taxonomies, but she knows enough to see similar patterns and pieces together Daisy becoming or being already an avatar of the hunt. Daisy's descent into becoming a hunt avatar is more spread out across the show, and there isn't an exact moment of apotheosis for her before season 4. And it feels more like Daisy lingers within humanity, not fully giving into the hunt, but still maintaining fear through her police actions. She deals with the vampires that Trevor Herbert mentions, hunts for John, marks him for the hunt, as I said, and then is used by Elias to hunt things while they prepare for the unknowing. And all these things revolve around being an avatar of the hunt, but she's not fully there yet. Daisy's one of the few avatars that we sort of see her glide into her avatar ship before getting thrown into the coffin, and then that just sort of changes everything. But yeah. They also talk about dreams. Daisy and Basira have stopped having dreams since they started working for the Institute, which will be confirmed later in 120 Eye Contact. Having given John a live statement, Daisy in 61 Heart Shoulder, and Basira in 43 Section 31, John watched their dreams and took in their fear, but since they became bound to the Institute, John no longer has access to them because he cannot be in the dreams of people who work in the Institute. That's just one quick, small moment of the eye in this episode. This episode being in season 3, and this leads into Daisy taking part of trying to stop the unknowing, and Daisy killing Hope, and then Breakin throwing her into the coffin, which he revealed he did in 128 Heavy Goods. Daisy goes through a lot.
There was a grotesque absurdism to it all, and I sometimes thought I might burst out laughing, though I knew that would quickly change to sobbing and I would be exposed. I had felt my safest option was to feign that same obsession that gripped Raleigh, that had taken my son.
Statement of Percy Fawcett regarding his final expedition into the Amazon. Original statement given June 27, 1930, released April 24, 2019. A summary of the episode. After being saved from the coffin, Daisy asks to stay with John as he reads a statement, which he agrees to, wanting to hear her input. In his statement, Percy Fawcett asks to be left alone as he wants to live in anonymity. He had been on a quest to find the lost city of Z, having failed once before, and trying again with his son, who had invited Raleigh Rimmel along as well. Percy's hesitant about Raleigh, but he sees in him the want to find the lost city as well. They passed the furthest checkpoint Percy had reached, Dead Horse Camp, proceeding without local guides. Eventually, they find a half-buried stone that fills them with hope, but Raleigh launches off into a direction, chasing something that they can't see. After that, Percy's memory becomes fraught and his journal becomes inaccurate. While walking through the jungle, he notices sharp things following them, and then they bump into John Franklin and some men from the Terror and Erebus, who had disappeared while searching for the Northwest Passage. They are attacked by beasts, and the group cheers in bloodlust after defeating them. They then find Edward von Toll, who had disappeared during a search for the mysterious polar island Zemlya Sanikoba. Percy laments of how enthralled Jack was to Raleigh and their hunt, and he passes out from exhaustion, waking up back in Dead Horse Camp, having been found by the local Kalabalos tribe. He hopes that whatever the people in the jungle were searching for isn't found. After the statement, John and Daisy theorize about it as he's trying to find evidence about a hunt ritual, Gertrude's notes mentioning the name of it, and Daisy mentions how the worst part of the hunt was ending the hunt, leading John to theorize that the ritual won't ever reach its culmination. Basira walks in, Daisy leaves to do exercises, and Basira asks John if Daisy was replaced, not recognizing her calm state after being cut off from the hunt while in the buried. This is a fun one. We are coming right off of probably one of the most, if not the most, uncomfortable episodes in 132 Entombed, where Daisy was thrown into the coffin and she's been cut off from the hunt, being too overwhelmed by the buried. And now outside of the coffin, she's weakened but free, both from the coffin, and free from the pull of the hunt that was on her. Within the statement, there's a handful of interesting moments of ambiguity, further pushing the amorphous treatment of the hunt within the show. This is the ritual of the hunt, but I won't talk about that until the end of the statement. Percy Fawcett, Jack Fawcett, and Riley Rimmel are all real historical figures that actually searched for the lost city of Z/Z. I'm going to keep saying Z, but I'm American, so it's Z, whatever. In 1925, who all disappeared in the Amazon jungle. A book written by David Gran in 2009 and a movie directed by James Gray in 2016 were made. The movie, an adaptation of the book. Percy also mentions him and Raleigh having read manuscript 512, which was a document detailing the discovery of a lost city in Bahia, Brazil, by João da Silva Guimarães in 1753. The document itself discovered in 1839 in the National Library of Brazil, which inspired him to search for the lost city that they talked about in the manuscript. The Magnus Archives and the Magnus Protocol have always taken historical events shrouded in mystery and added their 2 cents into what actually happened. And it's so fun looking into these historical roots. I learned about all of this Lost City of Zed. I learned about the movie. Tom Holland stars in that movie, and I've never heard about it, or at least I've heard about it and didn't keep it in mind. I might watch it, but I'm definitely going to read the book at some point in the future, and then I'll watch the movie after the book. But it was really fun learning about all this, doing the research, and I've known this episode I've loved this episode so long, and it's just now that I'm actually looking into oh, this actually kind of happened. Riley Rimmel, I learned while researching, also features briefly in the game Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Lara Croft, as she finds his grave in the Peruvian jungle. I played that game. I don't remember this happening, but per the game, I looked up online, she died on July 18th, 1925 from an infected leg wound. This is a picture from the game of Riley, but I have no idea nor do I think that this is a real photo, but I think it's cool. It somewhat matches Percy's description of Riley. He was tall, and his features, though any one of them might have been called handsome, were badly put together on his face, giving him an appearance I'll admit I took against at our first meeting. I agree. I don't know who this is. What if they drew this? Maybe it looks pretty realistic. So I don't know if it's an actual person that they just dressed up, took a picture for a 2-second thing that you discover in the game. I don't know where this picture come from. I should look that up, but I'm not. Look at him. As they begin their expedition, similar to 112, the characters prime themselves to be enthralled by the hunt. The ancient ruins, the statues, hieroglyphics, the sheer unrivaled beauty of it all. Through the trenches and the mud of the Western Front, it was the thought of Zed that kept me going, whispered promises of discovery. As stated prior, Percy also sees a similar glint of desire within Raleigh. However, it seems Raleigh is already consumed by the hunt in some way, as he lets mosquitoes into his tent to kill them like sport, recreation, saying, quote, he had inside him a strong and enduring hatred of bloodsuckers. A little later, Percy discovers a pile of dead birds in Raleigh's tent, as if he'd been hunting and collecting them. The term bloodsuckers immediately puts into our minds the vampires that Daisy and Trevor had mentioned, as up to now, besides them and Julia, the vampires are the only recurring hunt monster that we've gotten. Like the Dark has the shadow people, and the the Stranger has mannequins. The vampires have constantly been appearing for the hunt. And then they find a stone, half buried, worn almost completely smooth by time and exposure, but still clearly covered in their same hieroglyphics I had seen in the Silva's manuscript. After finding it, Riley runs off, chasing something, and then the nightmare state of the jungle begins for Percy. Either the stone itself or Raleigh led them there, but either way, this checkpoint marks the beginning of their involvement with the ritual. And it does feel like a nightmare. Percy's sense of navigation is shot, and his sense of time gone, his sense of space is all wobbly, and Jack seems oblivious. But Raleigh seems fully joined to the ritual. Raleigh no longer slept. Of this I was sure, and the inconvenience of setting up camp was clearly starting to grate on him. There is more nightmare ambiguity. Percy knows that something animal is following them, but they were not the birds or the mule or any of Raleigh's other victims. They are far too sharp for that. The story avoids full description of it, smartly I'll say, because it avoids the idea of animals like wolves or monsters like vampires, but maintains the thematic aesthetic, the vibe. Describing the monsters only through comparison allows for a lot of interesting ambiguity as to what they are and what they look like. This also brings to mind the maybe hunt avatar monster in 80 Librarian. Thomas McMahon was stabbed through the throat by something with too many teeth and limbs like knives, the through line being sharpness. Another great addition to the historical roots, adding to the nightmare feel of the jungle, is the discovery of the John Franklin expedition from the Terror and Erebus, a book by Dan Simmons, which I have. Hold on. I'm pretty sure I pulled this up before. Flip. See? I read it. It was really good. It's really good. It was published in 2007, and a TV show adaptation was made in 2018, which I also saw. I saw the show first, and then I read the book. The show was amazing. The book was even better. Like, they're both amazing, and I recommend both of them like a lot. So, like, it was a big surprise to hear the name the first time I listened to this episode, because I had just finished watching the show. It was also, the first time around, you're not fully paying attention. And when I heard the name, I was like, whoa, okay, what? What's happening? Like Percy, Jack, and Raleigh, John Franklin and the entire expedition were lost in 1845, searching for the Northwest Passage. The Terror and Erebus had much more people, but here it's only described about, I think it was like 6 people, like John Franklin and 6 people, or John Franklin part of the 6 people. I forget exactly, but it's definitely a smaller amount than. Actually, no, it was 6 people after they got attacked. They were 14, so there were like 9 people. 9 people, including John Franklin, were there. Much smaller than the full amount of the Terror and Erebus expedition, obviously. They were dressed for winter, for the cold, despite being in the humid Amazon, which doesn't escape Percy's notice, but everyone else treats them normally. They greet us like old friends, and Raleigh began to ask them what they had found, how their search was going, and how many had made it. The implication here is that after they got lost searching for the Northwest Passage, somehow they were sent here to the ritual to continue their search, the nebulous obsession that they chase. There's no way these people could be real. No way they could be here. But they were solid enough, and the gleam and obsession in their eyes matched Raleigh's exactly. Jack looked on in awe at both of them. The beasts that follow them attack, and we get further, less description, and more comparison. Something more cunning than a jaguar tore through my tent, teeth eager to find my throat. The presence of teeth grounds the imagery more, a pretty obvious connection, but adding a layer of intelligence, more cunning than a jaguar, is so deliciously ambiguous. What does that mean? What does more cunning than a jaguar? There's a lot of things that are more cunning than a jaguar, but the jaguar is still pretty cunning itself. What does that mean? And then the teeth, the jaws. It's so good. And it doesn't matter. That's just the vibe of the hunt is so good. There's an interesting description when the monsters are beaten off by the people. The blood-drunk cheering of the survivors, a sound of triumph, elation, and cruelty. And these all are common themes within hunt statements and avatars. Raleigh and John Franklin have fully given up any pretense of the lost city of Zed or the Northwest Passage. Why do I keep messing up, stumbling over my tongue? Northwest Passage. The nebulous thing that they chase still unknown to Percy. The group's bloodthirsty actions further emphasize how little information Percy has. Like, their actions highlight how much of a lack of information there is. And it just brings it forward like, hey, there is nothing that we know about here, but they are bloody, bloodthirsty, and angry and chasing something. It's not even juxtaposition. I would say maybe it's like juxtaposition of motive. Like, we don't know what they're searching for, but they're getting at it. And that's so, it's just the blank emptiness of knowledge is so enticing. What is it that they're chasing for? Why are they so obsessed? I love that. I really like this passage. There's nothing really to talk about. I just really like it. And now the very trees seem to be fleeing us, branches and trunks bending away as we passed, save for those that sharpened themselves and stretched towards us. There were things moving through the trees now that looked at first like men, but they did not move like them. Their mouths never opened, but I knew there was something dreadful about them. More comparisons without descriptions. Percy keeps getting more and more lost. At times, the position of the sun casts doubt on even the continent through which we traveled. This implies to me that they are no longer within the same location, a sort of limbo nightmare area for the ritual, where those who disappear looking for something end up. Such as Edward von Toll. He and his ship the Varya had vanished looking for Zemlya Zanikova in 1902. Zemlya Zanikova is also important to the Magnus archives, as we see in episode 101, Another Twist, it being the site of the ritual of the spiral, the Great Twisting. Edward von Toll and his crew were pinning the things that looked like men to trees with long iron spikes. They thrashed and struggled, and a long bilbous tongue hung from their throats, pinned by the iron of von Toll's men. This aligns with the description in 10 Vampire Killer that Trevor gives. Its jaw detached and a long tubular tongue about the thickness of my forearm snaked out of its throat and clamped onto the gushing wound. This proves the presence of the vampires in this episode, still using only comparison to describe the rest of them. Another terrifying moment. 2 of the figures pinned to the trees screamed in pain. They had no tongue, no distended belly filled with stolen blood. But no one seemed to notice, and if they did notice, no one cared. In the joy of the hunt, they had been seized. And that was that. This implies they were pinning other people that they caught in the jungle, perhaps other victims like Percy who hadn't been in the thrill of the hunt yet, or other members of their party that had been and just got lost in the shuffle. Some of the group collapse from exhaustion and hunger, either dead or close to it, and are left behind by the constantly moving group, further victims of the ritual. Percy follows in suit, almost allowing exhaustion and fear to let him collapse. And he wakes up in Dead Horse Camp as if waking from a nightmare. And he did wake from a nightmare. A lot of the time in the Magnus archives, people are able to escape their nightmares by different methods, collapsing, falling asleep, fainting. It's another aspect of dream logic. Once you finish dreaming, you leave the nightmare. To end the statement, Percy says, what these people pursued, what I pursued, doesn't exist, and I dearly hope that no others will ever suffer for our obsession. The sooner the world forgets about them, forgets me, the better. I just wish I hadn't lost my son to learn that lesson. He disappears into the world, maintaining his vanished status. The thing that they pursued, which doesn't exist, is the culmination of the ritual. Daisy tells John that she hated the end of the chase, sometimes letting criminals escape in the very last moment just to be able to continue chasing them. John sums it up. You don't think the hunt would let its ritual end. You don't think it would let them find the culmination. Gertrude's notes call it the Everchase. Yes, so this episode is detailing the ritual for the hunt, the Everchase. Out of the 12 rituals that we learn about, the web, the end, corruption, and extinction don't have rituals, and a stranger got 2 rituals. I would rank the Everchase at number 3. I'll touch on the rituals for the respective fears that I'm covering, so I'll share their rank when I get to them. I adore the idea of this ritual, one that will never reach its end. All of the rituals have their intended consequence, the introduction of their respective fear into our reality. The only thing, as basic as the fear that the hunt is, there is no constructed human group to work towards it, or not even human, just there's no group to work on the ritual. Every ritual beside this one had a specific person or group of people organizing. from the cults for the dark and the desolation, the circus of the other for the stranger, for the nemesis for the slaughter, Peter Lucas for the lonely. The hunt doesn't have an organized group or a prominent avatar to spearhead its ritual. What it does have is obsession. Whether intentional or not, all of the obsessive searching for things that have led to their perhaps deaths have guided people to this ritual, like some runoff that collects at the bottom of the valley, a constant pursuit for the culmination. But in order for the hunt to be present and to be powerful, there must be a hunt. When a prey escapes, they can continue feeling fear. But once the prey is caught and killed, they can no longer fear. This counterintuitive ritual is so fun because it feels like an organic creation from the fallacies of human neuroses. The rituals I've ranked above it I enjoy for other better things, but I just adore the idea of this animalistic ritual just happening. It just happened, and it continues like a top that never stops spinning. And I love this idea so much. The name of this episode is directly tied to Dead Horse Camp that Percy returns to, but also has another connection, the idiom to beat a dead horse. It means to return to a subject that has already been thoroughly discussed, and it's an interesting framework for the hunt ritual itself. The ever chase, an obsessive chase, again and again, never found, never to be found, beating a dead horse again and again. In the end of the episode, Basira comes in and talks to John as Daisy leaves, and she asks him if Daisy was replaced, citing Sasha's replacement by not Sasha. John pleads for Basira to share and collaborate with him, as she had gone off alone to look into the coffin after hearing that Daisy was trapped in the coffin, and her contact, Elias, had sent her away from the institute to allow John to go into the coffin alone to get him marked by the buried. John cites Gertrude's successes working with others and the need to communicate with others, and this lack of communication between them has led Basira away and John into the coffin. Basira says that Gertrude was the most effective person in the institute, which John mentions Tim had said before, and I have personally always wondered when he said this. And for this video, I can finally answer this question for myself. In episode 117, Testament, Tim says, "From what I can tell, there's only one person who's ever managed to hurt them, to really hurt them, and that's Gertrude Robinson. She was cold, ruthless, and she hit them when they were vulnerable, and she sacrificed a lot of people to do that." And now to Daisy. She's been exercising, having experienced muscle atrophy within the 6 months that she was stuck in the buried. Now, free of the hunt's influence, she's trying to stay away from it, having told John in Entombed that she didn't like how she was. And through season 4, Daisy will struggle with towing the line. In 136 Puppeteer, Melanie gives Daisy to John, as Daisy doesn't want to be alone since her imprisonment. In 142 Scrutiny, she mentions to Martin that she tries not to listen to the blood, the pull of the hunt inside her. And in 153 Love Bombing, she threatens Julia and Trevor. Trevor jokes that she's gotten thin, which John notes after the fact, and she says she's just been hungry. And we can see that despite being cut off from the hunt, she still draws power from it, but not hunting, the thing that fuels this ritual, is killing her. She also reiterates about not listening to the blood, also adding in to listen to the quiet. So that's a really great internal moment of how she's trying to deal with the attraction to the hunt. Daisy's arc now has been trying to right the wrongs that she committed on the police force, and now she's trying to separate herself from the hunt even further. Basira and John argue with each other over this decision. In 155 Cost of Living, Basira says she doesn't want Daisy to die, so she's been trying to get her to hunt, while John thinks Daisy will die anyways if she continues down that road. Power knows the bad things she's done and agrees with Daisy that it was her fault for doing them. She blames herself. But Basira blames it on the hunt itself. So there's like, who is to blame, Daisy or the hunt, for the things that Daisy did under the influence of the hunt? This argument of how Daisy should proceed hangs around season 4, culminating at the end of the season along with the change. But that's for later.
You alright?
Just peachy. I don't know, I feel like I saw something in the trees.
You did.
Oh, fantastic. You're very reassuring, you know that?
An examination of pack tactics, audio recorded by the archivist in situ, released on July 16th, 2020. A summary of this episode. John and Martin trek through the post-changed world, passing through a thick jungle. John hesitates, telling Martin what he's planning, and Martin asks him how he plans to find Basira, whom they've been trying to find. Martin asks what the point of this domain is, and John says it centers around betrayal among groups, which confuses Martin further regarding the classification of the hunt. John says Smirk's 14's framework doesn't mean anything here in the post-change world. Before he can share his plan, John has to make a statement about the domain itself. A group of hunters chase after a prey fueled by obsession and bloodlust. They corner their prey, who tries to cry out about the injustice, and they descend on it and kill it. Without the prey, the group looks at each other as one of their own becomes prey, and the cycle continues. When John returns to Martin, he tries to prepare him for something unpleasant, and then Trevor Herbert takes Martin hostage. He tries to threaten John, but John says that he couldn't kill Martin because he's no longer a hunter. He's now prey. Trevor's angry as he's been running ever since Daisy killed Julia Montauk before the change. John apologizes for using him as bait, and from the brush, Trevor is shot and killed. Basira appears from the bushes, interrogates John and Martin, and they continue forward through the domain. This is the first of only really a few episodes I've chosen from Season 5. In terms of classification, as John said, Smirk's 14 doesn't matter anymore in this world, so the episodes and statements in C2 aren't always clear as to which fears would be attached to them. Usually it's pretty straightforward and well telegraphed what fears represented. This one is one of them. This episode is pretty straightforward. It has a very interesting domain and wraps up one storyline while continuing another storyline forward. I've already mentioned many times before how much Season 5 misses the mark for me personally, while there are still some standouts here and there, but overall it's harder for me to enjoy this season and this episode. Many of the episodes in Season 5 are not as well connected to a larger plot as episodes prior, and that makes it hard for me to connect with them. However, Johnny Sims, the writer, does get to explore a lot of interesting forms of writing in this season, and this episode is one of these. The episode begins with John and Martin trapezing through the jungle, and another great aspect of Season 5 is highlighted here with the amazing soundscape that they create throughout all of the episodes, especially here. The jungle feels so deep and dangerous, and the trilling of the bird that we hear is uncanny and menacing. In the transcript, they also mention how the silence is loud, and they really drive that in. They really accomplish that. I don't know how they do that, because obviously with other statements and other recordings, the background, there's no noise, right? But here, the lack of noise is so prevalent, and I like that a lot. One thread they continue with is the continued discomfort of Martin, specifically, and John, which makes them argue with each other, as they do in the beginning of this episode. Martin wants to know what's happening or what's going to happen, and John wants to shield Martin from the horrible stuff he knows. Both want clashing with each other, which creates an interesting conflict. However, I don't really enjoy this conflict much, especially as it can be very repetitive. But at least this episode, the argument settles quickly, with John telling Martin that he's trying to look for Basira, but feels guilty about it since Basira had told John in Season 4 repeatedly to not look into her head. He also shares with Martin his theory of how the domains work. They don't just feed on the worst fears of the people trapped here, they're shaped by them too. It's enough to fear the domain itself, if not the entire power behind it. The more we go through Season 5, the more the individual aspects of the domains gets highlighted, and the decreasing prevalence of Smirk's 14 continues. The statement of the pack hunt is short, almost 1,000 words less than either Thrill of the Chase or Dead Horses statements. Most of the statements this season are pretty short, with more emphasis and space allocated for the soundscapes within the statements and the plot outside of the statements. The writing here is quick and short, contained and sharp, which helps deliver the rapidity of this episode. The first line is immediately different from most statements we've gotten. Feet pound, silent whisper, silent blood on lips, blood on teeth, blood scent of hated prey flows through the veins and into feet pounded silent in pursuit. The lack of punctuation in the writing and the lack of breaks in the performance helps transition us into the statement much better than any other introduction prior, setting the tone and pace perfectly. A lot of the ambiguity we see with the hunt is elevated by these descriptions, using vivid verbs without any sort of physical aesthetic description. Sure, we know that the pack is human. What they look like doesn't matter. We know that every domain is made to scare humans, and even with the focus on teeth and claws, throwing some doubt onto their humanity, we still know what they are. There is still interest in trying to see how far transformed the humans are because of their domain. The emphasis on a righteous cleansing violence, the intellect shared between them, a mutual determination that their quarry does not deserve to live, and the pack's bloodlust are all moments of horror that deliver how far the people have gotten within the hunt. It is the need to tear and rend and coat their faces slick with the blood of the guilty that pulses through every fiber of them. The thumping need inside their head to hate and to be right within their hate, to taste the blood of those who have declared themselves deserving of it. I'd have to look into it further, but I feel like there's a sense of iambic pentameter happening here, but I'd have to fully count the syllables happening in every sentence. But there's definitely the flow of iambic pentameter. Not physically describing the humans, but showing how feral their behavior is, continues the trend of amorphous treatment of the hunt. The prey they follow, as we find out, was part of the hunt, and much like the thrill of the chase, the positions of predator and prey can fluctuate on a whim at a mistake. The pack's internality is a blend of competing thoughts and contrasting ideas, which helps deliver the idea of a continued cycle and a large group. John isn't talking about a single hunter, nor is he talking about the current moment. It's all a continued cycle with some variations here and there, but overall, it stays the same, something slightly different than we see from other statements within Season 5. The people in the domain do feel fear, but like within the Everchase, their constant chase covers over their dread. They feel it for sure, it's written out, but they aren't focusing on it, making it a simple fear in the background, a simple dread at the back of their heads. Well, what else could it be? Surely not their packmates, sprinting along the side, leaping, jumping, grinning in anticipation, moving as a group, their minds as one, never looking at each other in the eye. There's definitely iambic pentameter here. When the prey is cornered, John, reading the statement that he just sort of pulls from the domain itself, says, "What's the time, Mr. Wolf?" And I didn't really understand what this was, so I had to look it up. Apparently, this is a variation of a game of tag, a game variation of tag. Mr. Wolf is in the game, Mr. Wolf is the person who chases and has their back turned away. Here, this is the people not being, this is the people being chased. I'm Mr. Wolf. The wolf has the people behind them, and they're turned away from the group surrounding them. The people would ask, "What's the time, Mr. Wolf?" And they can either call out a clock time, say 4 o'clock, and that would require the others to walk 4 steps forward. Or Mr. Wolf can say any variation of it's dinner time or it's lunch time, which begins the game of tag. Either the players touched Mr. Wolf's back before it's eating time and win, or Mr. Wolf tags someone during their feeding time and they switch. A new person becomes a tagger, yeah. And that's sort of like game. Here, it's twisted in saying the time to run is over, the time to suffer has arrived, which feels sort of hokey. It's a fun moment of absurdity, and another moment of absurdity within the hunt that feels, it just feels kind of fun to have that part. And then the prose dives briefly into the perspective of the prey themselves. Much like the pack being written like a group and like a cycle, the prey, which is singular, has contrasting thoughts that show how different the prey can be. But in the cycle, it generally ends the same way. What's interesting is that as the prose refuses to nail down a specific characteristic, thought, or description of either the pack or the prey, the way they die is more specific than before. It doesn't matter in the end, the cry is the same. This isn't fair, this isn't right. This statement differs from other statements within season 5 in the different treatment of these victims. Some episodes do have the victims nameless, but they're all at least specific individuals. Here, they are nameless, and they are devoid of individualism. The internal aspects of predator and prey shift around, almost as shifty as their position is within the hunt. The writing refuses to nail down specific interpretation, preferring to portray vibes and emotions. The fear of the hunt is so innate, so primal, that it reduces everyone to a basic shared identity: predator and prey. The horror of this episode is in 2 parts, and this is the first. In the last moments of the prey's life, they are cut down with the knowledge that this is a nightmare and they don't deserve to suffer like this again and again. With the dread powers taking hold of reality, they can kill anybody again and again, milking them for their fear. I don't think the prey is the same person every time, but I do believe that each of the pack has been prey before, and they would never know it. And so the prey is killed, and they revel in the kill. There is no sound to break their peace but the red ripping of flesh and the occasional transcendent scream of deserved agony. And this feels cathartic, as much of the statement has been building to this moment. The prose slows down once more as the uncertainty of what's going to happen next settles over the pack, and the second part of horror shows its face. The idea that a random person can be selected as prey by small signals and unperceived slights. In a way, the pivot that the pack makes to look to their fellow packmate and begin chasing them as prey is a great commentary of how people handle their friendships and how a single small perceived slight can turn someone against you. Not in a deadly way, but in a societal way, and this is scary. The hunt continues, and the statement ends as quickly as it came. And I like this statement because of how loose it is, how it feels like this one singular moment is a never-ending cycle, more than any other never-ending cycle within the other domains. And the soundscape of the jungle is so delicious. The running of the prey, the hunt of the predators is so cool. This episode helps complete the Trevor and Julia storylines that I've covered in the Dark and Desolation Entity Exploration videos. Check them out, as well as pushing Daisy's story arc a bit further. Like I mentioned before, Trevor and Julia were threatened away by her, and they return in 158 Panopticon, wanting to kill John for stealing and burning Jerry's page from the catalog of the Trapped Dead. Daisy allows herself to be taken by the hunt, chasing after Trevor and Julia. As we'll learn in 177 Wonderland, Daisy had killed Julia and was tracking Trevor in the tunnels underneath London, and Basira had been tracking her since the Eye Apocalypse started. With Trevor's death now, we have neatly finished him and Julia's presence within the Magnus archives, and with Daisy now in a rampage, Basira, John, and Martin try to follow her, ending in 179 Accomplice. There, Daisy is a monstrous hunt beast that barely recognizes John and tries to pull Basira into the hunt as well. She almost succeeds, but Basira shoots her, ending Daisy's role within the Magnus archives as well. Daisy had tried to atone for the wrongs that she did while she was a policewoman, but the Eye Apocalypse had led her back into being a hunter. The Eye Apocalypse did a lot of bad things, obviously. It's the Eye Apocalypse. And it's a tragic ending for her, but an amazing story arc. Interestingly, in 195 Adrift, Basira asks John if she's an avatar, if she's not trapped in a domain. I think you might have effectively inherited Daisy's role. That's very much the hunt's thing, isn't it? You kill and then you become. This push and pull is something we've seen frequently. Much like in the Everchase, Basira chases something nebulous. But if it's the hunt, what am I supposed to be chasing? All I've been doing is wandering around hoping I might find something to do, some way to help. Ah, damn it. This episode itself ends as Basira, John, and Martin continue through the jungle, John and Basira butting heads once more, heading towards the end of Daisy. Final comments. These 3 episodes I like for different reasons. 112 Thrill of the Chase is absurd, fun, and tense, and all in one, and it helps contextualize Daisy as a hunter. 133 Dead Horse is so good. It describes the ritual of the hunt, the Everchase, and has an interesting historical background that I loved learning about. 176 Blood Ties is a great end to Trevor and Julia's storylines, as well as leading us towards the end of Daisy's storyline. I would rank the episodes from best to least best. 133 Dead Horrors is so good. Outside of the frame. Yeah, outside of the frame, so good. And then 112 Thrill of the Chase, 176 Blood Ties. Both are really good. Good writing. I just adore 133 even a lot more. I think I would also rank 133 above any of the episodes I've talked about so far in the Entity Exploration, probably. Most of the depictions of the hunt are spread out in smaller moments within episodes focused on other entities, with the biggest focus going to Daisy as she's a main supporting character. The story doesn't want to explicitly describe visual motifs and themes, trying to establish instead a vibe, which allows for a varied, if unfocused, array of manifestations. Vampires, battle royales, chasing something nebulous, and obsession, all without making it feel like one singular thing. Sure, the wolf and animal illusions are there, but that's not the only thing there, which I appreciate. However, because of this approach, much of the episodes and overall representation of the hunt is disappointing to me in terms of its memorability and impact. It forgoes a strong central vision, which, like, for example, The Dark and the Desolation had, for this strong, varied vibe, which works for the hunt well, but, in a larger structured story, as the Magnus Archives is, this vibe tends to be lost in the shuffle of all the other fears. Daisy, Trevor, and Julia make up the largest representation of the hunt, and most of their episodes, specifically Daisy and Julia's episodes, aren't even focused on hunt manifestations. Hard Shoulder is buried. Section 31, Daisy's there. She encounters, like, something about the end. Julia encounters the dark. Trevor encounters to hunt, but also, like, there's a little bit of web in one of his episodes. And then whenever Julia and Trevor appear, again, 109 Nightfall, the dark, Thrill of the Chase, the corruption. And so, like, whenever they appear, majority of the time, it's not about the hunt. It's like they are hunt avatars experiencing other manifestations. And that's not exploring the hunt, that's exploring other fears. Overall, to me, the hunt is better than the dark and the desolation, as the hunt's parts are greater than its whole. However, it still has its fallacies, which is why it is number 13. Daisy's storyline is a strong central thread that crosses across seasons of the hunt, but since more of her important hunt moments happen adjacent to other fear-focused episodes, aka 132 Entombed being in the buried and losing the hunt, getting thrown into the coffin in the unknowing, chasing after John, and 82 The Eyewitnesses, her introduction into becoming a hunt avatar, like into the police force, is because of a slaughter manifestation. And so all those important Daisy moments occur for other fear episodes, and I need to focus on hunt-focused episodes. I feel like I haven't done her storyline justice because it happens in other fear episodes. I've discussed my enjoyment of her storyline in my season 4 retrospective, the first video I ever made, and I wanted to share how good her storyline was, which had inspired me to make that video, which, has led all the way to over here. So I want to recommend watching that video, but it's been like more than a year since I made it, and I probably would have made it better if I had the experience that I do now. But I will remake it eventually, very far in the future, because season 4 was really good. But yeah, her storyline is so much more complex and so much more interesting than I was able to share here. And so, I don't know, watch the show. Of the other 3 hunt-based episodes, 10 Vampire Hunter and 56 Children of the Night have interesting concepts. They also establish Trevor's backstory and introduce the vampires. But the story itself refuses to explore more about vampires, anything about the vampires. And that, while funny, can be at times frustrating. But then again, the vampires aren't important to the overall story. That's fine. I don't like Trevor that much. I'm so sorry. I don't like his story, and I'm so glad that I probably won't have to talk to him about him in length, in depth, further, except in protocol. And then my least favorite, I guess, is 31, First Hunt. It feels like a fairy tale nightmare, but not one that I'm really interested in. And the only scary thing that I remember being scared, like interesting horror moment, was the Duchess of Malfi quote, and that was the most fun I ever had in that episode, and that was not even written by Johnny Sims. So I'm so sorry. That's my least favorite episode of The Hunt. Obviously, these are my own opinions. I would love to hear what you think about The Hunt. Let me know why you like The Hunt, which episodes are great showcases for the fear for you, and why you also feel probably disappointed by The Hunt as well. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share with your friends. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.